Thursday, Xavier Muskie fans, and what some people consider the biggest day of the year. It's the day of the Crosstown shootout. Xavier will take on rival and neighbor University of Cincinnati Bearcats tonight at 7 o'clock. And I know that Jim Reaker, as well as myself, Jeff Zink, here on the Razercast. Jim, you got to be all a tingle because I know you look forward to this day every year.
Special day, Super Bowl of Cincinnati, so to speak, when the Bearcats and the Musketeers get together on the floor. It's going to be an exciting game. Both teams ranked in the top 25, and I have no predictions for tonight, although I do obviously favor the Musketeers.
Yeah, well, we're going to get to that in a little bit. We're going to keep you on suspense with what's going on. A couple of big things that happened. If you were listening to our Trogcast on Tuesday, Jimmy the Reek was at his peak. He not only predicted that number 1 and number 2 would both fall in the same day, which happened when Villanova lost to Marquette and Kansas lost at West Virginia, but he also said in that broadcast that he felt that Kentucky would take on another loss to one of the lesser teams in the SEC, and they did that night at Tennessee. So that leads us to the question. We say this now. We probably usually save this for our Trogcast on Tuesdays, Jim, but by then we'll know. It leads to the question now, with those 3 teams leading, and they went in at 1, 2, and 4, does that finally lead the way for Gonzaga to be number 1? They were sitting at number 3, and they're undefeated. And, of course, they've got some tests coming up. We'll talk about Gonzaga. Or do you go with the other argument, which is they may not be the best team in the country, and you still vote for who you think is the best team in the country, even though they've got losses?
I say make them number 1. I don't think they're the best team in the country, but make them number 1. What the heck? Everybody else has lost. In fact, to lead to that, I don't know if you saw the scores. I'm sure you did. Florida State, number 6, and number 8, UCLA, both went down last night. So College basketball is in total chaotic state right now. But no, make the Zags number 1. They're undefeated. Nobody else can claim that, and they probably will go undefeated the rest of the year.
Well, that would be the next question. Can they run the table? If you make them number 1, will they hold on to that until, I would say at least until the West Coast Conference tournament, because you never know what happens there. Coach Hugh might pull them off. The only real test they have in their conference, they have to travel to BYU, and BYU's tough, but they've lost to Utah Valley, who's sitting at 9-10, and San Diego, that's sitting at 9-9. The reason you throw it in there because it's always a tough conference game. And the only other tough game they would have is against number 21 St. Mary's. So can they run the table in their regular season game?
Oh, yeah, I believe they can, and I believe they could probably win their tournament. Can they win the NCAA championship, the tournament, win 6 games as the quality of opponents gets tougher and tougher as you proceed in that? Maybe. But, again, as I said the other day on the Trogcast, I believe there's probably anywhere between 10 to 20 teams who get hot at the right time and peak at the right time that could win this thing. Again, you got to agree they're not playing the type of schedule the teams at the top who are in the top 6, the Kansas, the Villanovas, the UKs, the Baylors, the Florida States. They're not playing that type of schedule day in and day out. So it's a little bit easier for them. But, yeah, make them number 1. Put a little pressure on them, that it does, as we saw in Milwaukee the other night, when number 1 comes into your place or you're playing number 1, I think there's added pressure. And, again, these are 18 to 22-year-old young men who sometimes don't deal well with pressure.
Okay. Well, Mark Few always seems to have him doing well in the season. He hasn't got to a Final Four yet. Maybe this is their year. They do have a couple of quality wins there. They beat Iowa State when they were still in the top 9. They were at 19 early in the year. They're on the periphery of the top 25 now. And, of course, they beat Arizona, who was then 16. Now they're number 7. That's not the same team that they beat. I don't know what would happen today if they played. And, of course, that win against St. Mary's. And to go to what you're saying, they are the only team in their conference with a win against a top 25 team. They've played plenty, but they're the only one. So we'll just have to wait to see what happens and see how the voters think, because a lot of people do have that idea that you vote for who you think the best team is, no matter what the record. And one of the things we'll talk about on Tuesday is the new announcement that they're going to start having a seed show like they do with the football, and that'll probably be more important to people to see who's going to get those 4 top seeds in the NCAA. But, of course, we're still 6 weeks out from that, so a lot of basketball to play as well.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of negative commentaries on that supposed top 16, which is going to begin in a couple weeks, is it?
The February 12th, first game.
Yeah, a lot of the people. But you know what they're doing. They're creating talk shows. They're creating interest in it because, as we talked about before, besides that big football game coming up next weekend, the sports world starts to focus on NCAA basketball as it moves forward to March Madness.
Well, let's move on to what we usually talk about here on Thursdays, and that's the Big East and Xavier basketball. We'll start with the Big East because, as you and I have talked, the Big East lately has become a little bit of the wild, wild west. Lots of upsets, a lot of close games. We talked about a couple of them on our Trodcast the other day. You know, Butler just escaped DePaul. Nova lost to Marquette, and Marquette earlier thumped Creighton. Of course, Xavier had those 3 straight losses, all to the ranked teams, Butler, Creighton, and Nova. So my first question to you is, it happened again. Is Creighton done? Can they survive without Maurice Watson? They lost by 28 to Marquette, and then last night lost by 20 to Georgetown.
That's a very good question, and I got to think, especially with the result of last night's game. Now, they were on the road at Georgetown, but they got beat by Georgetown by 20 points, and they lost at home against Marquette. Now, at that point, we was thinking Marquette was kind of a middle of the road, but with their upset the other night over Villanova, people are starting to sing the praises of Marquette, and maybe they're a team that's going to come on here at the end of the year. And actually, a lot of people, based on that win, are saying, "Oh yeah, they're an NCAA team now." I've sung the praises of Maurice Watson for a long time. I've seen him play many years or a few years here now in the Big East, and he's always impressed me. And again, I think he just makes everybody better on that team. So not only is he gone, I think the play of other players on that team, it will not be as effective during games. It's going to be interesting to watch. Creighton, we might see them fall, and I don't want to predict this because I have a lot of respect for Greg McDermott and what he does out there. But he's going to have to retool, rethink, reinvent, so to speak, Creighton and the way they play, and he could do that. But it'll be an interesting watch. You could see them fall deep, and maybe out of the NCAA tournament. It doesn't look good when Georgetown beats you by 20 points. And the game was not on TV, but I watched the score as it was going on, and it was never close. Georgetown took it to them, took them out of the game, played great defense, and that was actually the lowest point total Creighton had put up all year long, 51 points.
Well, they're definitely in the doldrums, and I was going to say, Tuesday they have to travel to Hinkle and take on Butler, and then the following Saturday come to Cintas. But I'd be more worried about this weekend's game at DePaul, who almost took it to Butler. Could they be looking at a 5-6 game loss streak, which would really derail the Creighton train?
Yeah, and you talk about DePaul taking it to Butler and almost beating him. Go back to right around the beginning of the season when DePaul almost took it to Villanova. Remember, that game was very, very close at the end. I think that was maybe the first game of the year, second game of the year for the two teams. So, yeah, DePaul it's just the Big East, top to bottom. We said this before. Anybody can beat anybody on any given night, and you like to think the home court has an advantage, but sometimes that hasn't been true. So, Creighton, it's going to be an interesting watch.
Well, that leads us to the one that's headed toward the top with a bullet. With Marquette's recent charge, are we now looking at a Big Five in the Big East? Of course, Creighton falling out may still keep it in the 4, but is Marquette legit? And you mentioned a little bit they may be an NCAA team, but after coming back 17 down against Nova and putting something to Creighton, could they be the spoiler in this year's Big East?
Well, yeah, I think right now, and again, this is very fluid. And remember, as you said just recently here, that we have 6 weeks to go. But I saw something last night where actually one of the experts had 6 teams, and now they were counting in at that point Seton Hall, and that was before Seton Hall lost last night to Butler, which was a very close game. They lost on their home court, and they fall to 3-5 in the league. So it's going to be, I think, 5 probably. And again, it depends. Marquette, maybe some of their problems come back. They've had a good week, but how these teams go, they seem to go in streaks at times. But that was amazing. I watched almost all that Marquette game. Of course, Marquette is one of my somewhat favorite schools and teams because I've given them lots of money in my life. So I do tend to watch them, see how they're investing my dollars up there. But here's the thing that was even more amazing, because I watched that game, and I think Villanova got off to an 8-0 start, and I'm thinking, whoa, this is going to get ugly real quick. But then they came back. But then again, built a lead like they do. In fact, I looked back at the 4:37 mark in the game. They had a double-digit lead still, Villanova. There is no way Villanova loses a game with a double-digit lead with 4:37 left. I mean, I'm just sitting there thinking it's not going to happen. But from that point on, actually, Wojo, who I've always sung the praises of, the Duke product, I think he's a great coach. He went into a 1-3-1, of course, which Xavier uses a lot. Most of the Xavier fans know that. And giving them open shots in the corner that they just couldn't hit. And Villanova usually hits those, and that's how they got back into the game. The other amazing thing that happened during that game, I've sung the praises of Marcus Howard, their upcoming freshman who's been scoring a lot of points, double digits. He didn't score any at all and fouled out of the game. And I was looking, I couldn't find it, but it seems like there was about 10 minutes left in the game when Marcus Howard fouled out after scoring no points. And you thought at that point, there's no way they're going to win this game. But another player that I mentioned the other day, Caton Reinhardt, who actually came from USC. He is one of those graduate students. He's at Marquette for 1 year. He's the one that poured in 19 points and actually made the 2 winning free throws at the end to put the Warriors, as they call them up there, but of course, politically correct, the Golden Eagles brought them that win.
And that leads us into discussion of Nova. I mean, they blew a 17-point lead. I was in bed when I got your text saying that, because I figured, well, they're not going to come back from 17 points down. But they've got to turn around and face number 12 Virginia in a non-conference game this weekend, who's fresh off a 17-point pounding of Notre Dame at South Bend. So is this going to be the down spurt for Nova, or will they bounce back, being happy that number 1 target's now off their back?
I think they'll bounce back. In fact, I think they'll beat Virginia. 2 factors there. Number 1, they're playing them at home. So, again, I still think that gives them the advantage. Number 2, Jay Wright. Jay Wright is a great coach, and Jay Wright will have them ready. And, again, I think it was just a shooting slump that hit at the wrong time. Again, all the stars aligned for Marquette for the last 5 minutes of that game, which we probably won't see that happen. Villanova is still a very, very good team. Got a lot of great shooters. Maybe their weakness, which was taken advantage of a little bit, again, as I've mentioned, is they don't quite have the under the basket game that they had last year with Daniel Oshefu. So I think they'll be fine. Little tidbit I read this morning, excuse me, I'm already going hoarse and the shootout hasn't even started. That Marquette got fined $5,000 for storming the court after upsetting Villanova. The great thing was the AD said we don't care. We enjoy our fans' enthusiasm when we'll gladly pay the $5,000, which actually is going to go to a charity called Camp Hometown Heroes, which is one of Coach Wojciechowski's favorite charities that actually funds camps for children, I think, who have lost a parent in the military. So again, I knew they weren't going to storm the court when Tennessee beat Kentucky, because the SEC has made a big point of there's a major stiff fine against it. But I somehow think, people worry about people getting hurt, but when you saw what happened, and you didn't see it actually, but you maybe saw some of the replays of what was happening, they were sitting on the bench or the press row, and the students stayed on the floor for at least 10 to 15 minutes celebrating. That's what college basketball and the college experience is all about.
Yeah, it's something we talked about earlier in the year, and I have no problem with it as long as you're being safe and nobody's getting hurt, and that there ends up being no taunting of the losing team, that you're celebrating your team and not taking advantage to point your fingers or do something to the other team. That's just a dirty pool as we go. Of course, the only thing I'd say, I think this game this weekend against UVA, Terry Bennett and his squad, they're sort of peaking, as Mike Bray and the Irish find out. It's not often you can go into South Bend and beat somebody by 17, so I don't know how much the home court will come. It's going to be a good game, one of many, many good games this weekend if you're at college basketball.
Yeah, I agree. That is going to be a tough game. Must watch if you have a chance. I think that's like a 2:30 tip. I'm sure it's on a national broadcast.
Yeah, well, let's finally get to what everybody is probably wanting to know. We talked a little bit about last week, but now it's time for the Crosstown shootout. Before we talk about that a little bit, let's just talk about our Muskies. This will be their fourth higher-ranked team in 5 games, the only one being their beatdown of Georgetown the other day to give them a little bit of a breather, and they lost the first 3. So many people are saying that X sort of needs this because they really don't have that signature win yet on their resume. They're a good team, and some people are starting to whisper that maybe this X team isn't as good as people thought it was when it was ranked number 7 in the preseason.
Yeah, it's an important game, and it's an important stretch. The rest of the season is all important. I think maybe the Musketeers were a little overrated coming into the season. That being said, and we're not going to talk about it, but, the whole idea that Miles Davis, initially it was expected that he would be here. Of course, he did show up. He's gone now, so that's over with. And I will make the comment, I think that's a good thing, that they've moved on from that. If he was still there, I think they still have to deal with that and his insert into the lineup at different times for the next few weeks before things settle down so they can move on. I think this is an important game. It'll be a good resume builder if they can pull it off, especially because it is only a 3-mile trip, but it isn't on the road game against a ranked opponent. But it's not the end of the world if they don't win it tonight. They still are, I think Joe Lenardi has them as a 6th seed right now, and that's probably about where they should be. But I go back to what Chris Mack said at the beginning of the Big East schedule. He goes, hey, guys, just want to tell you now, this is a roller coaster ride, and in the Big East you're going to lose games. Nobody's going to go undefeated. And, in fact, now you could see the champion maybe having 4 losses. Villanova and Butler tied right now with 2 losses, and we still have over half the Big East schedule to go. So, I think I like Chris Mack's experience now. He's been through this. I've seen some interviews with the way he's approaching this game. Hey, yeah, it's a big game. He's not going to back down from that, but he's not going to say, hey, this is a do-or-die game, because he understands that, like you and I and most people in Cincinnati, anything could happen tonight. Either team could win. It'll probably be close, but either team could probably blow the other one out given just the way things flow.
Well, let's go into the 84th rendition of the Crosstown, by whatever moniker you're going to give it, the shootout, the showdown, the classic. Teams, like you've mentioned several times, are the closest in in proximity geographically than any other rival in any other city. It's always a fantastic game. Cincinnati right now holds the edge 49-34, but Xavier's won the last 3, 7 of the last 9, and 14 of the last 20, going all the way back to the first game in 1928. So before we get into a lot of that history, what to expect from tonight's game? What do you think the keys are from your standpoint?
Well, you've said it a few times already, I think maybe on the Trogcast, that they're very similar. In fact, they both rely a lot on defense and rebounding. Those are the constants they have, the things that they're going to bring every night. Xavier's out-rebounded about every opponent except for maybe one or two. And Xavier's they play that pack line defense, which they have perfected, and is a very, very good defense for stopping shots close to the basket. The other similarity that I think they have, and again, you probably know more about UC than I do, although I've done a little bit of study and heard a few interviews from Mick Cronin and some other experts on them, or people who have followed them more closely, is they can shoot the three well at times, but as Xavier goes to, and probably every other NCAA team, Villanova, let's bring them up, that you can't rely on the three all the time. So sometimes it's just not there. But I think both of them have the ability to score a lot from the three-point line, but they both have the ability to shoot very poorly from the three-point line. So you look at this game, it's almost like a mirror. In fact, I went in and looked at the line, and the line's anywhere between giving the Bearcats a 3 to 5 point favorite. Well, if you know anything about lines, they're naturally getting 3 points for playing at home, which basically says this is going to be a very, very close game. And if played on a neutral site, the point spread or the line, the betting line, would probably only be 1 or 2 points in this game. So, I think that's what it's going to come down to. You talk about there's Kyle Washington and Gary Clark. Look, they average a lot of rebounds every game. And again, the Musketeers have gotten better with Rasheed Gasson. He's done a nice job since he's been inserted into the lineup. Sean O'Mara has actually come along and played better in the last few weeks. But that might be where it comes down to, is who rebounds the best, getting those easy baskets put in, especially on the offensive end. Who can get the most offensive rebounds to get second chance shots? That's what I think the key is to this game.
I'm with you on a lot of those points. The Washington-Clark versus Gaston thing is going to be key because it leads into so many other things, and it's not going to be pretty underneath because both these teams go hard at the boards and rely on their defense down there and the block shot. Cincinnati, getting 6 blocks a game. And you're right on the scoring. Cincinnati revolves around their 3-guard combo of Troy, Bring the Copain, Kevin Johnson, and Jacob Evans, who are averaging 34 of the Bearcats' 77 points a game. So if they're on, or the Xavier defense can't stop them, and like you said, if they go into the 1-3-1, the outside shot's going to have to happen. And if they're in the man-to-man, it's going to come down to the boards. But it's always a special game. Even yesterday on Andy Katz's podcast, Mick Cronin was on there, and he said, you just throw out the records. There's so many things that can happen in this game. Cincinnati, I'm not sure you've looked at it, was twice ranked number 1 in the country going into this game and lost to the Muskies, who were unranked. It's a fantastic inter-city rivalry, much like last night's USC-UCLA game, which the Trojans won on their home court. But you just never know what's going to happen. But that's because it's got such a deep, rich history to it.
Yeah, I know. I do want to say this about the rivalry. I think it has changed, especially since the brawl in 2011. And here's the term that when I hear all these interviews, and I've heard several interviews from Coach Mack and Coach Cronin this week, what I have kind of come up with is they both have a healthy respect for each other now, despite a bit of rivalry. For years, it sometimes was at an ugly state, and some things were allowed to go on that were not very classy on both sides. You know, you go back to what they talk about in '67 when supposedly one of the Xavier players threw a crutch at one of the UC players during the game. Actually, Oscar Robertson talked about that. I think in his second game, he said somebody threw a wine bottle at him as he was coming back to the bench during a timeout. So there were some ugly things that went on. Of course, it was always such a big game for the Musketeers as they were trying to gain some national notoriety, always thinking they were the little brother, being kind of the mid-major. And, of course, that has changed. Now they're both considered national powers. So I think there's a healthy respect. I've heard a lot of positive things said by each coach about the other team. So I think it's reached a good, you know, we'll still have fun. A lot of people, you know, are divided in their households and their jobs, whatever. You know, there's a lot of almost everybody except for you, Jeff, I think picks one over the other. And actually we'll probably be sitting down with a Bearcat fan tonight. Will be joining us. But I think you might be the only person in the city that I think you're 50-50, right?
No, I'm sure there's many of us. Undergrad at UC in '83 and then '93 at Xavier. There's a lot of us there, but two storied programs. Just to give you an idea, I don't know if you read this on a couple of the history pages. This rivalry is so important to the people of Cincinnati that in 1990, the local affiliate carrying the game refused to switch to the president's State of the Union address while the Bearcats and the Muskies were playing. They kept the game on, and their point of view was, well, there's only one Crosstown game that night, and there were many other channels. There were several other channels that could carry the State of the Union. Of course, this is back in the day where there weren't, thousands, but there's still cable did exist. So that's how important it is to the people of Cincinnati. And I know it's important to you, going back. I mean, this game dates back to 1928, first game. Xavier beat UC 29-25. They didn't play again for a little while. UC got their first win in '46 with a 53-39 win. And I know you've got, I think, a couple of things you want to add to us about the history of this program and that first game, don't you?
Well, yeah, I'm pushed always to come up with a very good trivia question. You know, that's kind of your big challenge of twice a week that I know you look forward to, because you know I'm going to dig deep into the archives to come up with something, because you're so good at and in this one I thought, wow, how am I going to find something that Jeff wouldn't know anything about? And I might not even get this one by you. But anyway, I referred to my book, Inside the Crosstown Shootout. You want me to bring this tonight? Because I've read it and referred to it. Then I'm sorry I didn't get it to you before the shootout. I'm sure you would have liked to read it then, but I'll bring it tonight for you when we get together to watch the game, so you can read it. I know you always like to have your nose in a good book. So, but anyway.
Go ahead.
First of all, March 7th, 1928. That's when that first game was played. I wanted to look up that date, and it struck me very quickly. That's my father's actual birth date. So I thought, wow, that's kind of strange, but that was the first game played. And I wanted to share with the listeners, and this is taken right from the Bill Cook book. He put an insert that was taken from the Cincinnati Enquirer, the local paper here that still exists today, in a written form for how long I'm not sure, but or in a paper form. But here is how they described that first game on March the 7th, 1928. And I'm going to try to read through this. It's almost like poetry, so excuse me if I stumble over it a little bit. I'm not the greatest poetry reader in the world. But they played before a wondrous crowd in a wondrous field house at Winding Way and Marion Avenue. 9,000 persons looked upon the two as they played and played hard. It is a splendid field house, this home of the Musketeer, and a very representative crowd watched the two scamper about. The wonderful behavior of the crowd, that's kind of ironic, everyone as forcibly as did the victory of the Musketeer over the Bearcat, the proud champion of the Buckeye Association. The Bearcat played well. The Musketeer played better. But that crowd, tier upon tier of human faces looking down upon the playful Musketeer and the even more playful Bearcat, professors, deans, financial wizards, bankers, editors, businessmen, clubmen, with their wives, mothers, or girlfriend, all sat in perfect calm. Then at times they would join in songs and yells of their alma mater, then shriek in ecstasy as the Bearcat shot a goal or the Musketeer made a basket, all fine and orderly. So things have changed in 87 years a little bit. And here's a point that then Bill Cook went in to investigate, that 9,000 is what they talked about were there. You know what the total seating capacity of Schmidt Fieldhouse is?
Well, I know the old Armory was only about 8,000, so considering Xavier was a little smaller, I'll say 7,500.
That wasn't your trivia question, but 2,900. And 29? Then they went, yeah, and they estimate that if they had it to any place that anybody could stand in that place, the total capacity, the total number of human beings they could get in that place is about 4,200. So where the 9,000 came from, I guess journalism, they didn't check their sources quite as closely as they do today. But this leads us to the trivia question that you, I know, are anxiously awaiting. And you might be able to you might know this right off the top of your head. But what was the event? Why did they play that first game? Do you know the reason they invited the Bearcats to come play that day?
The very first game?
In 1928.
No, I have no idea why they played that first game.
It was the dedication of Schmidt Fieldhouse, and so that's why they wanted to bring the Bearcats across town, so to speak, or 3 miles, because they knew it would draw a big crowd for that dedication and make it more special. So, got you again, man.
Yep. Yeah, that's you dig some deep ones. Every once in a while, I got to make you think you're going to win, so you keep coming with them. Now, Schmidt Fieldhouse, one of the 6 places that it's been played. Half of the games as of tonight were played in the Cincinnati Gardens, which is soon to be torn down. The others being places we mentioned, the old UC Armory Fieldhouse, and, of course, the current Fifth Third Arena, Shoemaker Center, the Cintas Center, and then for a few years they played at the U.S. Bank Arena, which was Riverfront Coliseum. One, because UC used to play their home teams there, and then when they were looking for a neutral court. Couple things you may not know. Go ahead.
Actually, both of them mentioned used the Gardens as their home court. In fact, there were times when they played where one of them was using it as their home court, or I think there was actually a few overlapping years. Maybe they both were using it as their home court. So, yeah, and again, as I always say, the 1999 game when they upset the number 1 ranked Bearcats, that's probably my favorite memory of the Crosstown shootout.
Well, can you imagine that for about 10 years, these two teams played twice a year, actually, from somewhere in the late 40s, from the 48-49 season through the 57-58 season. They actually played a home-and-home, which would have been interesting. And what I found out, which kind of surprised me, is tonight will only be the 3rd time in the rivalry that both teams are ranked. The only other times that happened was last year when UC was 23rd and Xavier was 12th, and in 1992 when UC was 19th and Xavier 22nd, very similar to what they are this year. But in looking this up, I've got a trivia question for you and see how you can do. Are you ready for this?
Oh, man, this ain't fair. I would have studied. Okay, go ahead, hit me.
Well, but you've researched all this to try to stump me. Now, it'd be interesting to see if people know who. There are only 2 UC coaches that have a losing record in the Crosstown shootout. That's one part. Do you know those two coaches, and which coach, one Bearcat and one Muskie, have the best record in the shootout? The first, do you happen to know the only two UC coaches that have a losing record against Xavier?
I'm going to say Bob Huggins and Mick Cronin.
Well, Mick Cronin is correct. He's got the worst record, actually. In his 10 years, he's only 3-7 against the Muskies, and that probably wouldn't have been hard to figure out considering the Muskies have won 7 of the last 9. Huggy Bear was even 8-8. So
okay, that's close on that then.
The only other one that had a losing record, and this won't surprise you when you think about it, was Tony Yates, who had a losing record to everybody on the planet. And any guesses as to who has the best record in the Crosstown shootout?
For either team?
Yeah.
Oh, one Bearcat, one Musketeer?
Yeah.
Bearcat, I would have no idea. I'm not that versed on their history, but I'm going to say Musketeer. It's going to be Skip Prosser.
Skip is a good guess, but not quite right. The current coach, Chris Mack, has the best record in the showdown at 5-2. Prosser was 4-3. We've got two coaches that were undefeated in multiple games. There were coaches that only coached in one game, so we're not counting those. Gail Catlett was 6-0 against the Xaviers in the 70s, and the great Ed Jucker, who won UC's 2 national championships, was 5-0. And before him, George Smith, who took the Bearcats and Oscar Robinson to 2 Final Fours, was 9-5 in his years at the helm. And, of course, we have the sad tale of Tay Baker, who was 5-2 against Xavier when he coached the Bearcats, but 0-6 against the Bearcats when he coached Xavier. So lots of great history. Come out and watch the game. You're going to have a hard time finding a ticket to the game tonight. Like I said, on some of the boards, any ticket was going for as little as $200 earlier in the week. It's a big, big sell. But your favorite watering hole or restaurant, or even just invite some friends over and make some guacamole and sit on the couch. It'll be a great time tonight, starting at 7. And we'll find out who the champion of Cincinnati is for the year, probably by 9:15.
Yes, we will. ESPN2, I believe, has the broadcast tonight. So if you're looking for it on your whatever TV provider you have, that's where you should look. And I would guess that all watering holes and establishments probably that have any sports at all going on will have it on, and probably on all screens tonight. I don't know if they'll show any other game while the Crosstown shootout's going on, because no other game matters in Cincinnati for at least those 2 hours.
And we will be watching it with a couple of close friends, and hope that you can find some close friends to do it. Anything else we need to add here, Jim, before we sign off and meet people again on Tuesday for our Trogcast?
Nope. One thing is, again, it's an important time for the Musketeers, and I'm a little bit worried about going to St. John's on Sunday after this game. We've talked about the fallout of this game being in the middle of the league. St. John's is playing well, and they always play well at the Garden. But for today, I'm only going to worry about those 2 hours tonight, and we'll worry about St. John's when this one's over.
Okay, and we'll see you next Thursday at our next Razercast. And I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about in the Big East and Xavier, as well as the Crosstown Classic, Showdown, Shootout, whatever you want to call it, many names. And join us again on Tuesday for our Trogcast with all things about NCAA men's basketball.
Go Muskies!